Good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Brian Worrell, City Council for District 4, and I'm the Chair for City Services and Innovation Technology. Today is Thursday, December 7th, 2023, and we're here today for a remote hearing on docket number 1688, order for a hearing to establish parking benefit districts in the city of Boston. This matter was sponsored by Councilor Ricardo Arroyo and referred to committee on November 1st, 2023. In accordance with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct its meeting in a public space that is open and physically accessible to the public, the City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom, and it is being recorded. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while ensuring public access to its deliberations through adequate alternative means. The public may watch this hearing via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv on Xfinity 8/RCN82 or Fios 964. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of this hearing. If you wish to sign up for public testimony and have not done so, please email Ron Cobb at ron.cobb@boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. I'm joined today by the lead sponsor, Councilor Arroyo from District 5, and also Councilor Docket. I will open up with a few brief remarks and then go to my councilor colleagues for any opening statements. I appreciate the initiative to explore the implementation of parking benefit districts in the city of Boston, but I think it's crucial to address any concerns regarding the equitable distribution and revenue of parking districts across various districts. I know that the examples from Arlington, Brookline, and other cities have been successful, and it's important for us to consider those potential disparities in revenue distributions. The proposed BPDs could favor districts like downtown Boston, perpetuating a cycle where affluent areas receive more funding, leaving districts that I serve, like Dorchester and Mattapan, at a disadvantage. My key question for today's hearing is understanding the motive behind Rosendale's push for implementation. Is it primary to address parking issues or to facilitate capital improvement? And what specific problem are we aiming to solve? I'd like to dive into what were the findings in the Rosendale parking and access plan, and hearing the administration's recommendations around PBDs. I'm looking forward to the conversation today, and I'll now pass it on to the lead sponsor, Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the advocates who brought this to my attention and the folks who are here with us today to make a case for them. For people watching, parking benefit districts are geographic areas where revenue generated from parking fees and fines is then reinvested into the local community from which those fees and fines were collected. The concept aims to link the cost of parking to the improvement of the area where that revenue was collected. And in a parking benefit district, the funds can be used for various neighborhood enhancements, such as improved infrastructure, public space, or public services. Think flower pots, think different things. For instance, in Rosendale Square, there was a mural that was painted on the sidewalk there. Think things like that. Some background. In Massachusetts, the state law specifically allows for the creation of parking benefit districts at the municipal level. And it goes further to specify that Main Street organizations are among a set of appropriate bodies to potentially manage parking benefit districts. They've been championed by local organizations such as the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and parking benefit district legislation was passed in 2016. So while the concept is popular among planners, it has not been widely implemented in Massachusetts. State law specifies that revenues from parking meters can be spent, and this section also applies to the use of parking benefit district revenues And beyond paying for the cost of meter installation, operations, and enforcement, these revenues may be used broadly for improvements to the public realm and transportation improvements, including but not limited to the operations of mass transit and facilities for biking and walking. State law thus allows for parking benefit districts to invest in such diverse projects as park benches, bus shelters, which we are often asked for, bike racks, or other improvements. Revenues can be split between a parking benefit district and the city's general fund. Currently, all parking meter funds or enforcement go to the City of Boston General Fund, allowing cities to recover costs of enforcement. In other words, you can still pay for enforcement, and then what is left over can then go into the local community. The idea behind parking benefit districts is really to encourage local support for parking management programs by demonstrating a direct connection between the fees that get paid by drivers and the improvements in the area where they park. This approach is often viewed as a way to make parking policies more transparent, locally beneficial, and acceptable to the community. And parking benefit districts can contribute to better urban planning, reduce traffic congestion, and improve local amenities by aligning those interests of drivers, residents, and local businesses all together. I'm a large advocate for parking benefit districts. Boston, I don't think this is necessary for every place in the city of Boston where we do meters. For instance, Newberry Street comes to mind, right? But there are places where the benefit of making sure that those dollars stay in those communities goes a lot further. So when you get into residential neighborhoods like Rosendale or Mattapan or Hyde Park, for instance, or Roxbury or any other sort of neighborhoods in the city that don't generally have specific ticketed items that go into the beautification of those public spaces where there's collection of fees or fines, you can see things like the difference between some of the public beautification things like having Christmas tree wreaths up, for instance, having lights up, having plotters and plants up and maintained. You see a difference in the level of that in certain communities. And so just to answer really quickly, Councilor Worrell, Chair Worrell, and then to hand over the floor, this is seeking more so to ensure that the dollars that get collected from residents in my district can then get used or earmarked or tagged to be used in the place where those fees were collected. And I think it goes towards a beautification of that area. It goes towards making sure that that investment is both helping free up parking spaces, because that's what parking meters tend to do. And also, while it's doing that, that the money that's being collected from those processes is being reinvested into the community in which they are being taken. And so I think it's a great idea. I think where it's been implemented, it's worked really well. The city of Boston currently does not have any. And so this would be a first. And so that is why I brought this forward. I will not be here to implement this from an ordinance standpoint, but it is my hope that this is interesting enough to other councilors that we start to see this and that my successor takes this up as a thing to do moving forward. And so that is why I'm here. You asked a number of different questions. I think there's experts here who are better prepared to answer those, but that is why this is here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. We've also been joined by City Council from District 7, Councilor Anderson. Councilor Durkin, the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much, Chair Worrell, and thank you so much to my colleague, Councilor Arroyo, for bringing this up. Obviously, parking is a perennial issue that we're dealing with in every single neighborhood. And, we're in the process in one part of my district changing some of the meters over to residential parking. So I actually didn't sign on to this hearing order because I wasn't sure exactly what this looked like or meant. But hearing Councilor Arroyo's explanation was super helpful and excited to dive in more. I think the things that I'm concerned about, obviously, are issues of equity too. A lot of, in my district, we want to make sure that the meters in my district are equitable and people are able to access. So, I was not sure if there was some element of price increases in different neighborhoods, because I want to make sure that that the folks who park on Newbury Street or in the Back Bay, everyone is able to access like the neighborhoods that I represent in an equal manner. And also realizing that a lot of people who use metered spaces are actually people who just can't find residential parking. So just while that's not directly related to the hearing order, just bringing those things to the forefront because there are things that matter to my constituents. Excited to see folks here from the administration who I know have been working with on issues in my district. And I think obviously parking is of concern to everyone. So excited to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Durkin. Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to attend this hearing to be able to collect some information, take notes, and take it back to my district. I will be interested in filing a similar order to have a conversation about the issues that are impacting District 7. Hope you don't mind that I will be keeping my camera off, Mr. Chair. I don't want to occupy any more space than I have to in this hearing. Again, just here, listening, taking notes, and hopefully collecting information that I can use for a hearing to discuss the very same topic in District 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Now we'll go to the administration panel. We are joined today with Chief for Transportation and Operations, Nick Gove, Director of Policy and Planning, Vinette Gupta, and new Mobility Director, Matt Warfield. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Councilor. Again, good morning. My name is Nick Gove. I'm Deputy Chief for Transportation and also serving as BTD Commissioner. Before we get into the rest of the presentation, with the Council's permission, I'd like to just highlight some parking meter revenue data points from fiscal 23. BTD collected over $26 million in parking meter revenue in FY23. That's a 1.3% increase over fiscal year 22 and a 6.7% increase over fiscal year 19. Total FY23 meter revenue represented 24.7% increase over the pandemic low in FY21, which was down to $21 million, and a 7.6% increase over the 5-year mean average of almost 25 million. As of December 1st, 2023, we had 168 multi-space meters and 5,822 single-space meters deployed citywide. And I can share any of these data points with the council via email. I also want to take an opportunity to update the council on BTD's ongoing audit of the residential permit parking program. We spoke about this the last time we were here. As you know, during the pandemic, all the resident permit parking stickers were automatically renewed, but we've since returned to our standard renewal process. To date, we've completed audits in 6 of the 21 neighborhoods. And that audit has resulted in us canceling a total of 11,657 RPP permits. That includes 7,674 permits in South Boston, over 2,500 in Dorchester, and over 1,100 in Beacon Hill. These permits were canceled because the respective vehicles were either no longer registered at the RPP sticker, at the address that the RPP sticker was originally issued for, or that the registration was expired or revoked by the RMV. While these vehicles previously had active RPP permits, it's likely many of the vehicle owners moved out of the city or sold the vehicle during that time. With that, we'll move back to the discussion of parking benefit districts. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about this today. Matt Warfield is going to provide an overview of the Rosendale Village Parking Meter Plan, as well as the policy considerations relative to implementing this parking benefit district there. So thank you. Matt, hand it off to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Nick. Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Warfield. I lead our new mobility team in the Policy and Planning Division within the Boston Transportation Department. So parking meters are a parking management tool that encourages parking turnover and discourages long-term parking. Enforcement of a parking meter is more efficient than non-metered time-restricted parking and results in better compliance. This increases turnover, increases available parking spaces, and allows more drivers to use those spaces to access their destination. In October of 2021, the Boston Transportation Department conducted a parking study in the Rosendale Square area. The study area included the Rosendale Village Main Streets District and the commercial corridors along Washington Street and Cummins Highway. The study found that blocks within the commercial core, or the streets surrounding the Village Market parking lot, were at or near 100% occupancy for much of the collection periods. Drivers were also parking well beyond the 2-hour parking limit, including on streets in the commercial core. We also found that most of the off-street parking lots had available parking at all times, including the Taft Hill Terrace Municipal Parking Lot and the MBTA commuter lots. More details on the study can be found in the Rosendale Parking Study October 2021 Summary of Findings, which is available on the department's website. In addition to the study, BTD surveyed the business community, commercial property owners, and employees of these businesses. This helped us to identify the perceptions of the issues and what they believed would be solutions. We also met with several community groups, the Main Streets Organization, and the business group to discuss the findings and proposed solutions. The decision to add parking meters was made based on the high frequency of vehicles parking well beyond the 2-hour time limit and the need for parking turnover adjacent to commercial properties. This coincided with the decision to regulate what was unrestricted parking immediately adjacent to the commercial core area, limiting parking to 4 hours but keeping it non-metered or free. The purpose is to deter people from the high demand areas and instead use the incentive of free parking to direct them to the areas with lower parking demand and less traffic congestion, including in our municipal parking lot. The plan calls for the addition of around 120 parking meter spaces that will be in effect 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Our approach to parking meter rates in Rosendale is to set a low per hour meter fee to encourage parking turnover and to limit the economic impact on visitors to the areas. The need for a low meter rate was something we heard from most of the community. Parking benefits districts, as you may know, work by capturing a portion of meter revenue. They then can either be invested into the area where the meters are located, or another approach is to consolidate the parking benefits district revenue and redistribute it equally to all PBDs. In this way, areas with higher parking demand and meter rates support areas with lower parking demand and meter rates, so all PBDs benefit equally. For the most part, for PBDs to work on their own, the meter fees need to be high enough to generate revenue beyond the cost of operating the parking meters. This is why parking benefits districts are typically reserved for areas where there is high demand for metered parking or where occupancy rates are above 85% on average. In these areas, the demand for parking warrants a higher per hour parking meter fee, where drivers are willing to pay a higher fee for the convenience of parking on street. In areas with lower parking demand, for a PPD to work on its own, it could result in meter fees being set higher than what we otherwise might set, needing to meet the cost to operate the meters and also generate revenue in addition. Otherwise, depending upon what rates are set, it could result in very little, if any, funds being generated from the PPD. One point to note, and I am not an expert on this, but I got the information that our parking meter fees go into the city's parking meter fund, which part of that is appropriated into the city's general fund for use on capital projects. Parking meter funds used in the capital plan are restricted to projects that have a transportation component, either for Vision Zero, design engineering work, and so forth. So essentially, our parking meter funds are reinvested back into transportation projects citywide. Some of the concerns we have about allocating funds through parking meter districts: the vast majority of our parking revenue today comes from downtown, Back Bay, South End, and Beacon Hill neighborhoods. Once a precedent is set for PBDs in the city, there will likely be demands from those neighborhoods to keep more of the parking money local. If we were to allow PBDs in these places, they would functionally concentrate money in our wealthiest neighborhoods instead of allowing it to be spent citywide. The administration has a clear goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and shifting trips towards more sustainable modes of transportation, such as walking, biking, and the use of public transit. Main streets or bids that received PBD money may be financially incentivized to advocate against policies that align with these goals and to invest funds in a way that takes us further away from achieving these goals. With that in mind, the decision of how to spend funds could become concentrated within an organization that may not have support from everyone in the community. Through our democratic process, we have elected officials who guide decisions about how to appropriate funds. This process includes ways for a diversity of voices to be heard and included in the decision-making. When we remove that process, we are providing greater power to one set of voices that will get to decide how public funds are spent, based on their interest and our perceptions of the problem and what the solutions would be. During the Rosendale parking and curb access planning process, there were a number of voices that did not agree with each other. Many of the members of the community felt that the issue was not enough parking, and their request was to build additional parking. This was driven by the perception and what they believed to be true. Rather than make decisions based on these perceptions, we conducted a parking study, surveyed the business community, and held public meetings to arrive at a final plan. When parking data was collected, it showed that the issue was not a lack of parking, but the issue was how the parking was being used. For example, in some of the busiest streets, cars were parked for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, meaning that those spaces were occupied by one vehicle and not available for others to use. It's important that decision-making be driven by data and known best practices. We use data to make decisions so we can see what is really going on, rather than relying upon opinions and perceptions that don't always reflect the reality of the situation. Typically, parking benefits districts are a response to city policies that have failed to invest in ways that improve the experience of the areas they are in, especially related to transportation. Go Boston 2030, the Climate Action Plan, and others clearly detail an ongoing commitment to invest in transportation infrastructure that supports sustainable transportation, shared vehicles, and the transitioning of vehicles to zero emissions. In Rosendale, this investment has included the implementation of a Vision Zero plan that introduced new crosswalks, daylighted intersections, and striping to slow vehicles and increase pedestrian safety. It also included bus stop enhancements, dedicated bus and bike lanes, public realm improvements such as the Birch Street Plaza, car share, and EV charging stations. We have also been responsive to community requests for curb access changes, having installed several short-timed pickup drop-off zones to accommodate restaurant takeout and short trip activity. The cost of these projects is exponentially more than what could be generated through a BPD, and diverting meter revenue into local BPD control would reduce our ability to invest in projects like these citywide. I believe there's a representative from our small business Main Streets group here on the call, but I can just mention that in terms of Main Street's budgets, the budget was recently increased in FY23 to be $125,000. In addition, we have about $4 million in ARPA funding that's being distributed to Main Street's organizations, and we have city staff dedicated to supporting our Main Streets organizations. So, in short, yes, that's all I got. Sorry. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Matt. I'm not sure if Vinette is going to be presenting as well. Is he in the room? All right, I don't see him. So with that said, I just want to acknowledge that we also been joined by our council president, Councilor Ed Flynn. But now we'll go to our council colleagues in order of arrival, starting with the lead sponsor for questions. Councilor Royal, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Quick question on the numbers that were brought forth. First and foremost, thank you for having that data and for being here today. The increases, were they tied to an increase in the amount of meters, or are we talking about the same amount of meters bringing in more revenue?
So you're asking about the FY23 revenue?
Yeah, so you mentioned that there was an increase in collected revenue, and I'm just trying to verify whether it's an increase due to an increase in actual meters in the city of Boston, or the same amount of meters from fiscal year 2022, but more money generated.
Sure. Actually, Don't have the exact data point available, but likely actually less meters than fiscal 22 because we've removed some meters related to various projects across the city. So roughly the same amount of meters, but maybe a few less.
Perfect. And then in terms of the revenue that are generated from that, are the numbers for tickets for overstaying a meter included in that, or is that a separate figure beyond that financial number that you just mentioned?
Separate figure. This is just the revenue collected from the meters themselves.
And do we know how much revenue is generated from tickets based on overstaying meters?
I don't have that data point offhand, but I can certainly get it.
Okay. I think the second question, sort of from a practical sense, I would assume that most revenue generated from meters is from our downtown areas. And so part of sort of the functionality to this that I am thinking about is the revenue that is generated from, well, actually, this is maybe a good question. Do we have a projection on how much revenue would be generated from the proposed meter plan in Rosendale Square? Do we have any sort of projection on what we think the amount that gets brought in through that would be?
Matt, do you know if we did a revenue projection on meters for Rosendale Square?
I did, sort of based on, so our meter rates in the city average from $1.25 an hour to I think $3.75. We do have 50-cent meter rates for motorcycle parking. We had not finalized what our rates in Rosendale would be, but our intent was to set them low, just to encourage that turnover, not to really generate a lot of revenue. But based upon our lowest $1.25 fee and based upon 100% occupancy over time, I think the amount coming in would have been a little, like around $300,000 from a PBD based on the 40% ask that Rosendale had in their request.
Thank you. And so the reason I bring that up is I agree that often when you pool large amounts of money together, it has more impact than when you have a small amount of money. But I would counter with, I do believe that if you gave even $100,000 or $50,000 to specifically Rosendale organizations for Rosendale purposes, that impact would be seen pretty large in a really impactful way. And so I certainly don't want to create a situation, just to be clear, where downtown areas are asking for, parking benefit districts for downtown areas. But I do believe that is somewhat blunted by the fact that the areas that I'm aware of, and I'm not like an expert on every single place we have meters, but when I'm thinking of places like the Seaport or places like Newberry Street or areas like that, the residential side of that is not nearly as engaged municipally and or as sized large in terms of people actually there as some of these residential neighborhoods that we actually have in the Southwest corridor, specifically in my district, for instance. Rosendale, other than that square, is largely a residential area, including in that square is a residential area, and hopefully continues to be more residential in that area, frankly, because it's such a great MBTA-based pathway. And so I understand the concerns about taking away money from where it's currently sort of general fund pooled. But I do think that it could have a beneficial impact. And I will just note that this is not the first time, under now 2 predecessors ago, under Rob Consalvo, there was an attempt to bring meters to the square. And there was a large argument made about, well, if you're going to bring meters to this square, why aren't we bringing meters to other squares? And I think part of what blunts a lot of that sort of negativity around what I think is an actual beneficial policy is the idea that the funds coming from that go directly to the community that they're in a tangible, directly connected way, where I can say this much money was given and it was used specifically in Rosendale Square, for instance, in these specific ways, or in the surrounding Rosendale area in these specific ways, I think does bring a lot more buy-in. This is not a first attempt, for instance, even at doing this in Rosendale Square, and it was halted in the past due to that sort of lack of buy-in. And so I do think this is a situation where in residential neighborhoods like this, where we are implementing these policies to help small businesses, because I do believe that it moves traffic flow. And I know that when you have transportation corridors that are actually served pretty well by the MBTA, in the sense that I think like 4 or 5 buses, in some cases 6 buses, come through these areas. You have a commuter rail there. It's tempting for other people to park for hours on end to use that as a place to then connect to the MBTA. This will actually help move things around. And so I think when you do these kinds of things, there's tangible benefits to making it so that a good policy, which I think the meters here would be good policy, is then also backed by an incentive, in the sense that that money is also coming right back to that community in a way that they can tangibly follow, see, and have some impact on how it's spent. And so I think that's, we've done participatory budgeting in the city of Boston. I think of this as sort of a model of participatory budgeting that is a much smaller scale and is directly part of meter collection. And so I'll leave it there for mine. I think a lot of my questions would be more for the advocate panel, but I'm very grateful to you all for one, putting this program together in Rosendale and the work that you put in for that, but also the work that you do every day. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. And I had one question, based on Councilor Arroyo's comments. Is, I know this has been established in other towns and cities. Is there an application process that speaks to the parking meter district or parking benefit district only being having some sort of percentage of residential area that it needs to be a part of, like a percentage of residential and commercial, that you only could get a parking benefit district if you have like 60% or 70% residential compared to commercial, right? So that we're not just, we're not giving the ability to downtown to have, a parking benefit district.
Yeah, no, if that question is directed at me based on kind of experience of other parking benefits districts, I think, it's if we're approaching this in a new policy way, we could, of course, could sort of draft the policy how we like. But I think one of the points about how parking benefit districts work and are successful is that they are in areas with high parking demand, which tends to be in areas like downtown and Back Bay. So if we have a policy based on residential percentage, we're kind of saying that the areas that we're focusing these on are not, are going to be off in our neighborhoods where the parking demand is less. And so one point earlier about the Rosendale Village Plan or the study is that while we saw that, streets in the commercial core were highly occupied, near 100% through most of the study, it was mostly occupied by vehicles there for long periods of time. And as we introduce parking meters and also introduce the free parking outside of the main core, that occupancy rate is going to decrease probably dramatically, which means the parking meters are working. And so the revenue we would generate there is going to be relatively small compared to what's generated in like the Back Bay and downtown.
Thank you. We'll go back to Councilor Arroyo.
Yeah, and this is sort of to my point. I think because it is small, because we're not talking about a major amount of dollars from the city perspective, we have a budget that's, going to be nearing, we're talking about in the billions. When we're talking about this amount of money, I think it's the perfect place to pilot it, because it's not a lot for the city of Boston, but it would be a lot for that Rosendale Square area. And I think that's what makes this work. If we were talking about millions of dollars, I think that's a completely different conversation. But we're talking about, sort of a very controlled amount of dollars that isn't going to go up exponentially, because the goal here for Rosendale Square was to keep those meter rates low, to more encourage movement, not income. And so I think that part of why this makes sense in a place like Rosendale Square, and for instance, in the future, if we decide to put these in Mattapan Square areas like that, is that the amount of money generated is not, I don't want to call it inconsequential, because all money generated is consequential, but it's not nearly on the scale of, if we're already making 26 million before this comes in, or 23 million before this comes in, when this comes online, it's not going to increase that margin by like $1 million. It's going to increase that margin by maybe upwards of a couple $100,000. And I think if you take a percentage of that, or even all of that, and give that to neighborhood community control, that's enough of amount that I think it would actually be beneficial to that area. And I think back to participatory budgeting, which this administration has shown an appetite for and has actually advocated for. When you think about participatory budgeting, we're talking about a specific percentage of the total amount of money that's generated for the city of Boston. If you did the ratio from a percentage wise, the ratio from the percentage of money generated from this one square is about the amount from a percentage wise of what we've said that participatory budgeting is allowed to essentially use to budget for themselves within our communities out of our general fund anyway. And so I think this is a good example of sort of trying to take participatory budgeting to this different space, which is revenue generation from meters. I think there's a number of different things here, but I will just note that the fact that this is not going to be a high grossing situation where we're talking about millions and millions of dollars coming in and then somebody's going to be managing that, but rather a very controlled amount of funds. And the parking benefit district would still allow for removing from those funds the cost of implementation and the cost of enforcement. So we're talking about even less funds. I think this is actually the perfect example of a situation where that parking benefit district can be sort of controlled because of the amount of revenue generated. I think I would probably share some concerns if it was millions and millions of dollars on end, because then containing that amount of money in one space would lead to some inequities, I think. But this is, to me, a more beneficial process because I think everybody sort of understands that this isn't going to be a high revenue situation. So just want to put that out there that, you know, maybe we tie parking benefit districts to the amount of money that is coming from a parking benefit district or the revenue generation from that or something of that nature. You know, I think the advocates will probably have a much better grasp on things we could do to sort of control that type of thing, to stop from inequity happening across the city from money coming from the general fund that we are then spending in different specific ways. But I do want to just note that the fact that this is not going to be a high revenue area makes this, to me, more of an ideal location for it. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Royal. Now we'll go to Councilor Durkin. Any questions? All right, we'll go to Councilor Anderson. And just for the record, for my colleagues, I did give the lead sponsor a little bit more time, but everyone's gonna have 5 minutes. I'll go off screen and come back on screen when your 5 minutes is up. Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if that, I feel a certain way about that. Are you trying to tell me I talk a lot? I think I only have one question, and like Councilor Arroyo, my other questions are for the advocates or the other panelists. I guess given the communities such as Arlington, and I think I heard Reading, Brookline, that have successfully employed versions of PBD, are there any key lessons or practices that you feel would be beneficial to implementing it from the learned experiences for Boston? Anything beneficial that you could say that we could take from those communities?
Matt, do you have any background on kind of the experiences in some of those other places?
Yeah, I think the places that have been most successful is when they pool the funds and then distribute sort of on a broader citywide basis. And so I'm more familiar with this Portland, Oregon's approach to parking benefits districts, where they pool the funds and then they use those funds to for implementing a transportation wallet, which is essentially subsidized transit, bike memberships, various other things that become free to residents to kind of discourage car use, that type of thing. I do believe in Brookline, it's also a pooled revenue situation where they pull the money in and then they spend it on transportation related projects, and it's not necessarily handed to a local community entity. I mean, in some ways, it's almost like we already have a parking benefits district because we are taking our parking meter revenue, putting it into a parking meter fund, and then spending it on transportation projects. But of course, it's not localized. It's citywide capital projects that it gets spent on.
Right. I guess, you know, in making it accessible, or, you know, or I guess making improvements on accessibility and desirability for the district, are there specific improvements or that we could envision that we would say, well, this could be a temporary pilot that would benefit the community, that you foresee? Like, could you actually consider a pilot in this area?
I guess that would be for Commissioner Gove or Matt.
Yeah, Matt, I don't know if we've looked at this specific to any kind of upcoming capital projects or deferred maintenance work. Do you know if we've looked at it yet? I'm not sure.
No, I mean, that would be something that we'd have to go back and take a look at, you know, in terms of how this could work. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. That was a really thorough presentation. Thank you to all the administration representatives that are here and for your work. Councilor, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for the time. I'll reserve the rest of my questions for the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. We've also been joined by Councilor Flaherty and Councilor Murphy. Councilor Flaherty, any questions?
Morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the lead sponsors. It's good to see the commissioner and his team here. In addition to balancing the neighborhoods, because I guess the revenue generated from the meters would vary from neighborhood to neighborhood, and obviously some neighborhoods would be experiencing, I guess, a bigger take. So balancing to make sure that you know, we're not pitting neighborhoods against each other would be important, but also getting a commitment from BTD as well as the BPDA about not removing meters. There are folks, some may be on this Zoom, there are folks in the city, BTD and BPDA, that want to eliminate meters altogether. They actually want to eliminate cars altogether. We're seeing that development project after development project after development project. So nonsensical, I know, and a lot of folks would agree with me, but if we're going to do a pilot program and or we're talking about expanding the pilot program, we need to get a commitment right out of the gate from BTD and BPDA that the meters play a vital function, revenue generating, that go to a lot of these great programs. But there is an effort afoot, so make no mistake about it, that there are some folks in city government that want to remove all meters. They actually want to remove all cars. So I'd like to get a sense as to where we are with that, instead of rolling out a pilot program and or talking about expanding the pilot program, only to be fighting BPDA and BPD about whether or not meters should exist in the city of Boston. We should be identifying locations where we could expand meters so that we could pay for a lot of these improvements that we talk about, from intersection to intersection or business district to business district. Our small local businesses depend, it's their lifeline to depend on people being able to pull up and get out of the car and transact business, and or be able to pick up and drop off quickly, to be able to get those meters and have consistent turnover. That's how a lot of these small local businesses survive. We start eliminating that opportunity, we're going to start to see small businesses boarded up or and moving out. So I think that should be part of this discussion. So I obviously support the concept, like the idea of starting with a pilot program, work out the kinks, and look to areas to expand it. But part of this conversation needs to be, what's the BPDA's position on this and what's BTD's position on this? Because recently there's been a pushback on parking spaces and on meters and things of that nature. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to the lead sponsors, and look forward to hopefully getting this pilot up and running and expanded. But we do need these, and small businesses need this to continue for them so that they can continue to be viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Flaherty. I'm not sure if Commissioner Gove or Director Warfield want to offer any comments or remarks.
Just quickly, I mean, yes, we have certainly removed some metered spaces as part of curb regulation changes and physical changes to the street. But we are in the early phases of developing a procurement for new meters. So we do understand that revenue collection from parking, and specifically parking meters, is critical for us in the city, and that that is part of our long-term plan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Council Murphy, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you to the sponsors too for putting this forward. I'm looking forward to this pilot, but have some similar questions that have already been asked. But is the money collected from meters? Oftentimes we find out or we hear that money's collected, but then doesn't go back, or it can be chosen where the money goes back to. Is all money collected from meters then given back to like transportation type concerns across the city or infrastructure updates? Or does it go into a general fund where it then you have to kind of scrap and fight for it?
So yeah, as Matt mentioned earlier, yes, a large portion of the revenue collected from meters does go to transportation projects across the city.
That's good. I'll just reiterate that we need to make sure that the small businesses and those who will be financially affected are part of this conversation, and that the pilot is just that, right? And that we come back and we look at the data and have like real conversations. A lot of the mistrust I hear as an at-large counselor on different projects across the city. So we have these studies, we have these pilots, and even if the community feels as though there's things not going well, they're then not brought back to the table. So I hope we have your promise that we'll see it through, but then work together if we need to either expand it or stop it or whatever we need to do. So that's just my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Murphy. By show of hands, you can raise your virtual hands. Any other questions from my council colleagues for the administration? All right, seeing no hands. Thank you, Commissioner Gove. I see that you came off mute. Do you have final remarks?
Just to answer Councilor Arroyo's earlier question, I was able to get some of that data while we were in the meeting here. But overall ticket revenue, BTD ticket revenue, violation revenue for fiscal 23 was approximately 60 million. And unpaid meter fee tickets was approximately 10 million. And of that, about 1 million was from overtimed meters, over limit.
Thank you for that. So roughly meter adjacent or meter revenue is somewhere around 34 to 35 million.
Yes, if you factor in the unpaid and overtime, it's actually a little bit closer, probably 36, 37 million.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner Gove. Thank you, Director Warfield, for your time and your service to the city of Boston. And feel free to stay to hear the community panel. But now we'll bring, I'm on mute. Now we'll bring forward the community panel. Part of community panel, let me get my list, is Chris Dempsey, sorry, former chair of Brookline Transportation Board. We have Anna Van Ramadi, and please correct me if I said that wrong, Van Ray Mortel, Executive Director of Rosendale Village Main Street. Brendan Fogarty, Treasurer and Volunteer Board Member of Rosendale Village Main Street. Leah Robbins, Government Affairs Director of Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And Georgia Barlow, Government Affairs Metropolitan Area Planning Council. First, we'll start with, I see on my screen Anna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Anna Van Ray Mortel, and I'm the Executive Director of Roslindale Village Main Street and a Roslindale resident myself. I've been with RVMS for over 2 years, and I've really enjoyed our various opportunities to partner with the city to improve our neighborhood. I'm here today to support the Parking Benefit District Plan and to highlight why Roslindale Village could be a great place to pilot these efforts with the partnership of RVMS. For nearly 40 years, RVMS has been working with Roslindale Village, with business owners, residents, and city officials to improve our district. We've had great success with these efforts, and we've been working on expanding our events and business support programs further to ensure that we can continue supporting our community. Over our 40 years, we've grown into an organization that employs 3 full-time and 2 part-time staff members, and we have decades of experience working with the city to invest funds into the neighborhood. Additionally, we have shared findings and resources with other Main Street organizations across the city, helping them grow as well. So I see a future where we can help other neighborhoods set up their own parking benefit districts. The catchment area that we serve is Roslindale Village and aligns with the areas that parking meters will be installed. This positions RVMS to take a strong leadership role in ensuring the parking benefit district is a success. I would like to note that we're not advocating for higher meter fees to fund specific projects or to go into RVMS operational costs. We're really open-minded when it comes to the potential investments of these funds, and we've come up with a few ideas based on needs expressed by the community, including our small business owners. These needs include trash collection and beautification, power washing, green space improvements, plantings and waterings, physical improvements like facade and storefront work, and decorations to make it look like a more unified and retail shopping district, especially as our district stretches across Washington Street. The 2 options I see here are either that the money goes into a parking meter fund at City Hall, or we have this opportunity to keep in our community and explore a really cool and new opportunity to support neighborhoods across Boston. Boston really is a city made up of neighborhoods, so I think this serves us well. It's the mission of RVMS to ensure that Roslindale Village is a vibrant space for our community where small businesses can thrive. And as their director of RVMS, my priority is to keep our money, even if the amounts may seem small to the city, that we keep this money local. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And now we'll go to Chris Dempsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to present today. And I also want to thank Councilor Arroyo and his staff for reaching out with the invitation. My name is Chris Dempsey. I am a Brookline Town Meeting member, and I was also the chair of the Brookline Transportation Board as Brookline Village adopted a parking benefit district. If you don't mind, I'll share my screen and just walk through a few slides that I hope will be helpful and instructive in informing today's conversation. So these slides that you'll see are mostly a version of what was presented to Brookline Town Meeting in 2019, and I will be accepting compliments on my PowerPoint graphic skills that you'll see throughout this presentation. So as a community in Brookline, we have struggled to manage our curb space. It's in very high demand. And this is a typical conversation at the Brookline Transportation Board. We'll have a request to remove some parking so that someone can pull out of their driveway. We'll have pushback from merchants in the area who want to preserve that parking. We might have pushback from residents who want to also preserve that parking or may want to move to residential parking programs. It's a kind of constant tension. And we found a need to improve the ways that we hear from the community about how to manage parking and the prices that we set for parking meters and then what to do with that revenue. So that led us to a discussion of parking benefit districts. And that's really what a PBD is. It's a way to get more comprehensive community input for both the ways that we manage parking and use parking, generate parking revenue, and then also use that parking revenue. In the case of Brookline, we would create a parking benefit advisory board that would inform the select board, which is sort of the executive branch of town government and which sets parking meter rates, as well as the transportation board, which is an adjunct of the select board and on a day-to-day basis regulates the public right-of-way, including all parking. I want to just make an important point here, which is that I see my role in today's panel as sharing our experience in Brookline. It is not for me to tell you what to do in the city of Boston. You need to make your own decision on that. I'm just here as a resource as you make your own decision. It matters who's around the table in these decisions. And in Brookline, we felt that a parking benefit district would improve the diversity of people that are around the table, including merchants, and would also provide opportunities to enhance the equity opportunity that comes from the generation of those resources. And so here on this screen, you can see some examples of some of the ways that parking benefit district revenue could be used to advance equity for everyone who's using a particular geographic area. So PBDs were created in Massachusetts state law in Governor Baker's 2016 municipal modernization legislation. And they've been used for many years and decades in other parts of the country. They're relatively new in Massachusetts. We looked to Arlington as a model. They created a PBD in 2017. So here you can just see an image of downtown Arlington, which created its PBD in conjunction with installing parking meters. And you've got other examples around the country like Boulder, Colorado, Austin, Texas, and Pasadena, which is maybe the most famous example nationally of a parking benefit district, where the mayor and city council there have really credited the creation of the PBD and the installation of parking meters with the revival of Old Town Pasadena into a vibrant shopping area. So what did Warrant Article 16 in Brookline Town Meeting do in the spring of 2019? It allowed the select board to create the Parking Benefit District Advisory Board, which would be composed of 9 members of the Brookline Village community. It would allow that advisory board to meet and to study parking issues, and then to make recommendations to the select board and to the transportation board about the parking meter rates and the uses of those revenues. So importantly, in Brookline, the model that we chose is really an advisory role, not one that had where the new board that was created had full control over the use of those funds. It was going to make recommendations, or does make recommendations, to the select board. In this image here, you can see a map of the geographic limits of the parking benefit districts, and every triangle here represents one parking meter. So we made some decisions about which meters to include and to exclude in this geographic area. One other point I'll make here is that in Brookline, we were not looking to do this in conjunction with installing new meters. We were taking the existing meters that we already had. So the historic flow of funds in Brookline is somewhat similar to the flow of funds you have now in Boston. At the time, it cost $1.25 for every hour of parking in Brookline Village, and 100% of that revenue flowed to the general fund. One of the consequences of that is that many merchants felt that they were not seeing the benefits from the revenue created from those parking meters, that they felt that parking meter rates were something that was being done to them, not something that was being done with them. And the creation of our parking benefit district was meant to help address that issue. So with the parking benefit district, the PBD would have the option of recommending to the select board, for example, a 25-cent increase per hour. So you go from $1.25 to $1.50. In our model, $1.25 still stays with the town of Brookline to support the needs at the townwide level, but that additional incremental quarter then would go to the PBD fund, and this advisory board could make recommendations about how to use that revenue. In the case of the meters we selected in Brookline Village, this would amount to about $200,000 a year, which for Brookline Village is a significant amount of money. And as you've heard from the other panelists, those resources can be used for things like planting trees or maintaining trees, flowers and planters, lighting, events and activities like farmers markets or fairs. All of that is appropriate for the use of PBD funds. One other thing that was highlighted in our proposal was to actually improve the awareness and availability of parking. So creating pamphlets that could be placed on the countertops of local businesses so that when someone came in and complained about it being hard to find parking or complained about the parking meter rates, the merchants could hand that pamphlet to them so they had more information about what was happening with their funds and where they might be able to park for less in the future. Some key governance points here, a couple of which maybe I've already made, but this was purely an advisory role. The select board, in our case, would still maintain full control over the amounts and the uses, but there was every expectation the select board was going to go along more or less with the recommendations of the advisory board. And as I mentioned, this would only deal with any increases to parking meter rates. The existing flow of funds wouldn't be changed. We felt that was important to support the broader needs of the town. So what happened in Brookline Village? We were successful in May of 2019 of passing this through town meeting with especially strong support from town meeting members in and around Brookline Village. Over the course of the summer of 2019, the advisory board was appointed by the select board, and they began meeting in the fall of 2019. They started to convene actually under the leadership and chairmanship of Brian Kane, who you may know. He's now the executive director of the MBTA advisory board. He's a former former member of the Brookline Transportation Board, served along with me, very engaged in these issues. But what happened is within a few months of this advisory board meeting for the first time, COVID hit. And we went from a situation where we were looking to maybe increase meter rates and where parking was a tough issue to overnight one where the town was waiving parking meter fees. And we were desperate to just have anybody parking in Brookline Village because the merchants were really hurting. And so that effectively just derailed the conversation or the momentum that we had. And so one of my lessons learned from Brookline that may be relevant to Boston is that this is going to require ongoing attention and support. In our case, Brian ended up having to step aside from his duties. I was pretty involved in some other things in 2021 and 2022 that some of you are aware of. And so I was not able to have the leadership of this program that I wanted. And so while we had an effective political process to create this PVD, it hasn't actually changed much in Brookline Village yet. I'm encouraged about what the future could hold here. I think there's still an opportunity for us to advance this conversation as we come out of the pandemic and things return somewhat to normal. Parking is certainly an issue, as it was in 2019, again, in Brookline Village. So the groundwork has been laid, the opportunity is there, but you'll have to look to other communities when you're looking for the actual impact, places like Arlington and Pasadena. In Brookline, I think the jury is still out there and there's more to do. With that, I'll end my portion and I look forward to any questions that members of the committee may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Now we'll go to Brendan.
Thank you so much, Chair Worrell, and thank you as well to Councilor Arroyo for introducing this measure. And thank you to other members of the community that have added valuable insight into this opportunity. So my name is Brendan Fogarty. I am a volunteer member of the board of Roslindale Village Main Streets. I also serve as our treasurer. I'm a walker, a biker, and also a driver in the Roslindale area. I live in Roslindale with my family, and I was really attracted to this neighborhood because of its dynamic commercial core and really exciting small town feel. So the mission of RVMS is to promote the village as an appealing destination and dynamic community center. When BTD finalized its Roslindale Square parking and curb access plan earlier this year, it was really clear that the local community had a choice. We could either go ahead with a sort of business as usual approach and see new parking revenues, really net new revenues, find their way to a distant meter fund, or we could try something new altogether that was more valuable for small businesses and could really serve as a catalyst for commercial activity in our neighborhood in the area where the parking is actually taking place. So the idea behind a parking benefit district is it's really an exciting opportunity to set up a sort of rare virtuous cycle in community development. So you have revenues being raised by parking districts, reinvested in local amenities, public realm amenities such as public art. We've heard a lot about additional trash collection, power washing that could take place. So parking meters themselves are a tool for curb access. We see parking benefit districts as a tool for reinvesting those revenues in commercial activity. It's really about driving small business growth, small business excellence outside of the downtown area and in the neighborhoods themselves. reinvesting locally is a vital path forward for a sort of small living 10-minute city framework. Rosendale Village is a great place to try this, given our leadership in other areas. Main Streets districts themselves, we were the first one, and we're really excited to try this on. There's been some really interesting conversation about the amount of money being relatively small, and I certainly agree. This is not the sort of revenue that allows a parking benefit district to, overhaul the commuter rail station, for example. That sort of scale of capital improvement is totally out of scope. We view the parking benefit district's potential as being a source for public realm improvements that are really having a more tangible impact on businesses, making sure shoppers are activated, making sure people are consistently coming downtown, and making sure, yes, that parking is turning over fast and that people are able to park and that small businesses really see this in their bottom lines. Councilor Arroyo brought this up earlier. It is not a preordained thing that parking meters arrive and stay forever in a given community. So to the extent that the city, in pursuing its green mobility plans and in managing curb access better, wants to put parking meters in a neighborhood, to the extent that is happening, we think parking benefit districts are a way to get buy-in from business owners and to really show tangible, really one-for-one benefits. So we're super excited about this opportunity, not just because Roslindale is on the docket here, but really because we see it as a sustainable model for other Main Streets districts in the city. And as Anna said earlier, we would love to be a part of a larger conversation about how other districts can succeed along with parking benefit districts there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Now we'll go to Georgia.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair Worrell and members of the committee for the opportunity to offer testimony today, and thank you to Councilman Arroyo for the invitation to join today's hearing. My name is Georgia Barlow. I'm a government affairs specialist at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is the regional planning agency for the 101 cities and towns of Greater Boston. MAPC works to build a more equitable region by promoting smart growth and regional collaboration. And central to these goals are ensuring that we have both a complete transportation system and have walkable downtowns. We support the creation of parking benefit districts, particularly in larger cities with multiple downtown districts. And we look forward to working both with Boston and municipalities across our region to make these districts possible. As you know, Massachusetts first legalized parking benefit districts in 2016. And since then, several communities, all within MAPC's region, have taken advantage of the ability. Arlington, Reading, and Brookline. And these districts are a way to ensure that parking revenue is reinvested into the community where it's generated to support a wide range of improvements. Our transportation planning team has worked with communities throughout the region to create parking management plans. And often one of our main recommendations is to install parking meters to encourage parking turnover and create an opportunity for more people to utilize services within business districts, particularly restaurants, stores, and other small businesses. We see parking benefit districts as a way to manage curb parking space while generating the revenue needed for local improvements. Ensuring that this revenue will stay in the district to be used for public space improvement or transportation improvements. Among these goals, including things like improving pedestrian, biking, or public transit infrastructure in the neighborhood, are critical components to working in walkable neighborhoods. In addition to adding parking meters to a parking benefit district, one of the goals here is to find that real balance between pricing that encourages parking turnover, but not pricing at a rate so high that people won't park there and utilize the services. And we've been working with communities to identify what that really looks like. Since 2015, MAPC has been working to help communities understand parking supply, demand, and utilization through our Metro Boston Perfect Fit Parking Initiative. Now in phase 4, we've consistently found that parking supply is the single largest factor associated with parking demand. We find that the more space is provided, the more cars were parked, all other things being equal. We know that there's a strong relationship between free parking and people's car usage. National trends indicate that more urban residents are foregoing vehicle ownership in favor of more sustainable practices, but parking requirements have generally remained the same despite this shift. As an agency, we're interested in seeing people get around the city and region using bikes, walking, utilizing public transit options, and parking benefit districts are another tool to support that mode shift while encouraging patronage turnover and raising small amounts of local revenue to support those districts. The revenue raised is an opportunity to develop infrastructure for these other modes of transportation to help reduce traffic, make more walkable and accessible district, and support our ambitious greenhouse gas reduction goals, particularly an important piece considering that transportation is about 30% of the emissions in our last inventory. MAPC is eager to work with Boston officials to implement this pilot project and to encourage parking turnover and ensure that any revenue collected stays in the neighborhood for further development for the area. Thanks.
Thank you, Georgia. Now we'll go to our council colleagues for questions, starting with the lead sponsor, Councilor Roy.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the advocates too for their work on this. My question is for the folks here from Rosendale Village Main Streets. How would you envision, or what's the best way that you would envision moving forward with the city on a pilot program specifically for Rosendale? Since we do have, for folks who are watching and don't know, the meters aren't yet in Rosendale. And so this would give us the opportunity to have sort of the pilot program run concurrently with or simultaneously with these, the implementation of the meters themselves. And so this is one of those things where I would like to sort of align those things together. But my question specifically for Rosendale Village Main Streets is, how do you foresee a partnership or a pilot working? How would you like it to work? And what are the things you think you could do from a local area specifically if we're able to get that pilot started and moving?
Thank you so much, Councilor. And Anna, we can, I guess, tag team this one together. I do want to start off by sort of rehashing Anna's point at the beginning that RVMS is very flexible around this, and we don't necessarily have a particular vision for exactly how this would work. I think there would always, it's important to set the groundwork that there would always be a scenario that there would be sufficient revenue to the city to cover the costs of collection and enforcement. We also don't think that revenues from violations should be a part of the parking methods district either. The optics and the incentives there perhaps aren't the best part of that revenue model. This should really be about curb access and business turnover and business success. I should say customer turnover and business success. It's important to put down at the beginning that RVMS is an independent 501c3, and we operate a contract with the city for technical assistance, as most folks on this call know. And I think that model is quite robust, and a pilot could also involve a similar contractual situation where RVMS is fulfilling a contract with policy requirements from City Council, where those are actually baked in. If councilors would like to see certain public realm improvements prioritized, those could be in there. Guidance is accepted and certainly welcome. And I think a contractual model could be quite robust, where we're separating it from the existing contracts we fulfill, and we're able to have a start, middle, and end, and do a great retrospective with city officials.
I'll tag onto that. Thank you, Brendan. Like Brendan said, we're really flexible with how this could be enacted. Our main goal is that this money is invested back in the community where it's collected. So even if the money doesn't exactly flow through an RVMS budget, maybe it stays in a separate budget through the city. Like, we're flexible with all possible scenarios. I think one thing that's important is a point that Chris Dempsey brought up around how we need to be flexible and communicative throughout this whole process. The amounts collected may be unexpected. The needs of the business owners with public realm improvements may change. And so I see that with the first few years where this could be a pilot program, that we're going to need frequent communication, lots of check-ins with the business owners to see what their priorities are, so we can adjust where needed. But like Brendan said, we are really flexible, and we're happy to find a solution that works with most people. with everyone, really.
Thank you very much. I'm obviously sold on the idea of at least having this be a pilot to see how this would work. You know, as a counselor, as a resident of our neighborhoods, it just makes a lot of sense to me to invest that money directly back in. And I'll say that, you know, there's aspects of my district, you know, there's a lot of talk about a Blue Hill Ave redesign and what that would look like. But part of that acknowledges that there needs to be a beautification of these areas. And so there are parts of our city where the investment just simply hasn't been there for beautification in the same way, right? I can go through some of our neighborhoods and areas, and I'm gonna see right now within this Christmas season, you know, lights up, wreaths up, you know, sort of winterized seasonal holiday things. When spring shows up, you see all of these plants in place. And so, for instance, in Hyde Park, we had a bunch of plants put in, but that was done by Keep Hyde Park Beautiful, a local organization, not the city. And they were maintained by volunteer residents who just made sure that they watered them and took care of them. And so when we see those kinds of things, you know, as someone who has traveled, as someone who has lived in other cities, you see cities invest a lot more into the beautification and sort of upkeep of general areas. And to me, one of the biggest draws for this is that it allows people to know, you know, the general fund is largely mysterious. I think a lot of folks think that there's more money in the general fund than there is, because so much of the money that is generated for a city like the size of Boston is going to union contracts and municipal workers and all of these different things that are slated year to year. The amount of actual free money is sort of limited. It's not in the billions. But when you take something like this and you put a couple $100,000 directly into those kinds of things, it buys a lot of potted plants, it buys a lot of maintenance, and it has an impact, I think, on how people feel about their neighborhoods, how people feel about their squares, and how people feel about things like a parking plan, because you can see the tangible benefits to having that, not just in the flow of traffic for businesses, which for a regular resident might not even be something that you notice. You're not going there and clocking every car when it comes and when it goes. The businesses will, and folks will feel that impact. But the regular resident is more likely seeing things directly that they see, right? What their eyes are seeing, whether it's a fair, a festival, a street party, a bunch of plants, a mural, things that they were not seeing there before. And I think this is a perfect chance for the city to allow for some of that give back, in the sense of the same principles that, for instance, drove participatory budgeting. The idea that people have a good idea of what they want to see funded and how they want to fund it, and they should be given a say in how that works. And, you know, I think I think all of my council colleagues should really be advocating for this for their districts where they have these. But I think the fact of the matter is, we're equipped to do this. At Rosendale Village Main Streets is a great organization, but I also think we, as Rosendale as a neighborhood, is very equipped to run a pilot on this, and the city, I think, is equipped to ensure that we run that pilot to the best of our abilities. I guess my question for everybody here on this panel is, I am already sold on this idea. I think you've presented a lot of the benefits, but if you can highlight specifically, Chris, you actually have it in place in your neighborhood. So if you could highlight what you consider the biggest benefit, or one of the biggest benefits that you've seen from having a parking benefit district in Brookline. And then for, you know, Rosendale Village Main Streets in the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, what you believe some of the top line benefits of this would be for a city like the size of Boston, right? Because I think we would be the biggest city to start to implement this in the state. Why you think this makes a lot of sense for the city of Boston. So I'll go with you, Chris, first, because you already have it in place, and so you can speak more to what the benefits have been for Brookline. And I guess on the alternate side of that, where you think things could be better, if you think there are things that could be better because you've now had the program and are able to sort of work through it, that we can maybe avoid in this pilot having similar issues if they exist.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilor. So in my mind, the biggest benefit has been that we've taken a merchant community, small business community in Brookline Village that felt that there was never any benefit to them for increasing parking meter rates, and that they had no say in how those resources were spent, turning them into an active and engaged community of small business owners that now understand that it is in their benefit to have parking well managed and that they can now have some say over how those resources are used. And that was part of the beauty of the process, is that we didn't really know how the merchants and the community members were going to want to use this revenue, but we knew we had a lot of great options, and it was going to be fun to see, it will be fun to see how those resources are used in the future, whether it's public art or plantings or street cleaning or improved snow removal, any number of things. And to be clear, the town of Brookline is also responsible for contributing to all of those things. And we, in no way did we want the town to pull back on its commitment. This is just a little extra on the top that makes things a little bit better and a little bit more special. So that's been the main benefit, is changing the conversation about parking and parking meter rates, trying to get to that virtuous cycle that Brendan has mentioned. I think the main drawback and lesson learned for us is that this effort in Brookline was really dependent, and it's partly the nature of town government versus city government, very dependent on a set of volunteers, including me, actually sort of pushing it and making it happen. And when those volunteers were pulled in other directions for other reasons, we haven't really been able to implement it in the way that I would like to see. We also had a long-time transportation administrator named Todd Corain, who was recruited away to the city of Worcester, and he's now there. He was another person in staff who was very supportive of this, helping make it happen, and then he left. So the pandemic really hurt our momentum, and that would be I think just a watch point for the city. If you do move forward with this, you're going to need a lot of volunteers and staff, folks like Commissioner Gove and volunteers like Brendan and others, really kind of pushing this to actually make it happen and make it successful. Don't underestimate the amount of work that will be required to make this a win. It has the potential to be a big win, but it won't happen just by creating a pilot or passing an ordinance. You'll need more work after that as well. You're on mute, Councilor.
I have to do it at least once a hearing. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. That was very comprehensive, and I really do appreciate your insights on that, and ways we can sort of try to get ahead of that. I think there's often a miscalculation on how much human resource is required in making these things work. And when you have volunteers, there's sometimes an over-reliance on over-extraction from those volunteers of their time and of their abilities. And so we want to make sure that when this comes to Rosendale, because I'm not just speaking into existence, we do it in a way where that is evenly split or sort of dependably split between organizations and individuals who are sort of going to stick it through to the best of their abilities. So thank you. That's very helpful.
I'll just add, I would underscore what everyone else has already said, but for us, from a planning perspective, these parking benefit districts are really beneficial in bigger cities with multiple like downtown neighborhood areas who have that interest. And if they're going to be raising this parking revenue, seeing it utilized in their area, it really helps with that buy-in from local small businesses, from the residents, when they are guaranteed that that return on investment is going to be seen, as others have noted, in those improvements in their home neighborhoods. So this is definitely a tool that I think we're seeing in the larger cities, and I think we'll continue to see, particularly as we come out of like a post-COVID and people are returning to more traditional modes of getting to their downtown areas. But I think for us, ensuring that there's the benefit for the businesses making that investment in the local area is really the key component to why these are going to be successful and why they're necessary in the cities as well.
Thank you. And I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add as far as what you think the biggest selling point or the biggest appealing part of this is for Rosendale Square. And then at that point, I have finished my questions, Mr. Chair. And so if you have any questions, I would cede to you, and that would be it for me. Thank you.
I can add a few points about where we think the benefit will be seen the most. I have three main ideas. The first is a need expressed by most of our small business owners in its about trash collection, especially around bus stops. One I can think of in particular is on Poplar Street, the bus shelter there. There's trash all around the surrounding area of the bus shelters, and I've talked to business owners time and time again about that issue. Regular watering for planters is another thing that was brought up. Right now, all of this work is done by volunteers through RVMS and Roslindale Green and Clean, but with more funding, we could have a contractor come in and do consistent watering. Right now, our arrangement is a little scrappy, volunteers coming out to water, business owners watering, but with a contractor coming out and ensuring that all the planters are consistently watered, we can also expand our reach when it comes to these planters. And the last thing we thought of was storefront improvements. There's been a lot of talk today about equity here, and Roslindale definitely is one of the wealthier neighborhoods in Boston. That being said, a lot of our business owners don't share that wealth. The city of Boston has a restore program where community development block grants are able to be directed to small businesses to fund restorative signage projects. But Roslindale is no longer eligible for these funds because of the general neighborhood income. That doesn't mean the need isn't still there with the business owners. Something RVMS has started recently is our own restorative signage project where we can invest some of our funds to help these businesses. But with more funds from the Parking Benefit District, we could expand this impact. I also want to mention that we have different partnerships with different departments at the city. For example, RVMS, we pay for maintenance at Adams Park every year because of the damage that the farmers market does to the grass. So we partner with the Parks Department where they do regular cleaning services, but we bring in an outside organization to do organic seeding and organic care for the park year round. So we're really open to all of these options and different arrangements.
Thank you so much. And hopefully, Mr. Chair, I don't know if you have any questions, but as the person who will be here next year, hopefully you take this up as well.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Arroyo. And just want to just say thank you to the community panel and thank you to our main streets. I know how hard, you guys working as a district councilor. We rely heavily on you guys for, not only maintaining the business districts, but helping our businesses thrive. And I applaud, Councilor Arroyo trying to find creative ways on how to get more services to our main streets and to our commercial districts and just to the district, just in general, for capital improvements or whether it's, beautification of our districts. I know how hard it is and to get, services and, beautification dollars into our neighborhoods. And this is a good idea. I guess one of my questions for Chris is, you spoke about, human capital and human resources and hours that needs to be poured into this. If you could just give us an idea of, how many people was on the board, who was part of the board, just to kind of get an idea of what it would entail and what it means, like having everybody at the table. And, was it, all business owners? Was it residents? Was it people like yourself who are just advocates for transportation? What did that table look like?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. So the advisory board was made up of 9 members. It was a mix of non-resident or resident or non-resident business owners who had some storefront or small business located in or very near the Parking Benefit District, as well as residents. And we tried to balance those two. They were appointed by the select board through an application process. So we kind of sent a message out to anyone that would listen, various listservs and co-working spaces, and anywhere that would have any relevance to Brookline Village, to encourage people to apply. There were more applications than there were seats on the board, so the select board went through a process of interviewing people and then appointing them to the board. One of the citizens, as I mentioned, Brian Kane, became chair, and they began meeting on roughly a monthly basis with staff support. So typically Todd Corain, the transportation administrator, would conduct that. And that was all done in public meetings. So it was noticed and people were encouraged to participate and join those meetings. And again, it was meant to reflect the community, reflect the diversity of the community across types of business owners and residents, drivers, people that were more transit or walking oriented, all mixed in together. That was the goal, and I think we did achieve that with the composition of the committee.
Thank you, Chris, for that. And is there any final remarks from anyone on our community panel that would like to give, final closing remarks?
Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this, Chair. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And I do have one last question for Director Warfield. I see that he's still in the room. I would love to get an idea, in Rosendale Square of like projected cost and projected revenue, just to kind of get an idea of, if we had to charge more on the meter, like how much more would that be in order to make, make sure that there's funds, for the community. But I also put that into our questions to the administration. But with that said, we'll go over to public testimony. And I think signed up for public testimony first, let me see if he's in the room, I don't see a Ben, but if a Ben Crother is here, if you could please raise your hand. Yep, America Walks. You now have the floor. For the record, please state your name and any affiliation. And you have 2 minutes. Ben, the floor is now yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Crother. Coming to you today as a Roslindale resident. I'd just like to thank Councilor Arroyo for arranging this hearing and the other members of the committee, as well as the City of Boston staff for their time. We in Roslindale, we have some amazing local businesses owned by residents here. They keep a lot of money in our community. And we also have so many 311 calls that go unanswered for small-scale street improvements that make our neighborhood both safer and a more beautiful place. So there are a lot of Roslindale residents that are excited for this idea for several reasons. Bringing money back to the community for funds like improved sidewalks and safer streets, making it easier to park in Roslindale Village by increasing vehicle turnover, which is also a boon for local business owners there. Reducing traffic around Roslindale Square by reducing the number of drivers who circle through that square again and again, looking for parking spaces, once again coming back to that turnover. And providing a managed parking system that reduces the number of cars that park illegally and dangerously in crosswalks and intersections when they can't find this space. So we see a whole number of benefits here. There are a lot of us that would welcome a parking benefits district, that funds things like better lighting, wayfinding, and streetscape improvements, improving local storefronts, making them more attractive. The list goes on and on. We could say sidewalk safety improvements, planting, snow removal. That could be another thing for our winter months. So we welcome this idea because of its ability to both fund locally based needs while at the same time making it easier to park in Roslindale Village. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Now we'll go to John Freeman. If you're in the room, please raise your hand. I'll say the name one more time, John Freeman. All right, I'm not seeing any hand raised. We'll go to Lori Rodwin. The floor is now yours, and you have 2 minutes. I just saw Lori's hand raised. Lori, if you could come off of mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me turn on my camera too. Hi. So Matt is still on the line, which is great. I want to just take a second to tell you who I am. I'm Lori Radwin. I'm the coordinator of the Roslindale Coalition. Our members live, own businesses, or work in Roslindale, and we are very interested in how the community experiences the city of Boston. About half of our members are merchants in Roslindale Square, and writ large, they're legacy owners, they're Black and brown owners, and they are barbers and stylists and manicurists and the services like that. Matt Warfield was wonderful with his parking study and survey, and part of his wonderfulness, if you're still there, Matt, had to do with working not only with RVMS, but working with the business group and a coalition. And when there are larger conversations, I think it's appropriate for us to be with them. I heard equity mentioned several times, and I'm going to speak to this. I have very serious concerns about this docket. First, as I will describe, the current parking plan appears to discriminate against BIPOC owners and residents. Second, there's a hypervigilant quality in Roslindale to reports of bus lane parking to 311. And last, there are unsavory internet posts and in-person threats when residents and store owners object to a development with little or no parking. Matt, I've written you a couple of times, and I'd love to meet with you soon because the current parking plan for Roslindale is not equitable. This is drawn from descriptive statistics. I have emailed these statistics to District 5 Councilor, the Councilor-elect, at-largers, and others. I presented these statistics to the Mayor's Liaison and BTD directors, and Matt, I think you should find that in your mail. I understand that the statistics have also been presented to the Mayor's Special Advisor. At no point did my analysis come under scrutiny, so I believe it holds. The plan disadvantage is Black, brown, and immigrant-owned businesses. It shows that the amount of time that a car may park in front of a Black, Latinx, or immigrant-owned business and residence differs importantly when compared with their counterparts. And I have a, analysis of the square, but I'll just give you one example. There are disparities in parking restrictions for residences that border Roslindale Square. And Matt's parking plan outlines what is considered part of the business district. So we've got proposed parking plan with Roslindale residents on Washington Street from Poplar to Albano and Robert Street from Belgrade to South Street. 2020 census tract data shows that the residents on that stretch of Washington Street are about 49% white and 51% Black or Hispanic. The residents on the stretch of Robert Street vicinity are around 80 to 100% white.
Thank you, Lori. You had 2 minutes, and I gave you a little bit more time.
Okay, I really think it's important because I asked to be on the panel, and I wasn't allowed to be on the panel. And these are very important implications for why Roslindale Square should not be the pilot site.
I could give you 30 more seconds just because we have another public test, someone else who wants a public
All right,
test.
I just will tell you that there's a huge number of 311, there's a vigilante type quality to the 311 calls. They are, I audited it, and more calls are made about parking in front of Black and brown businesses than any other. There are people riding in the bus taking photos. That's the 311 testimony. And last, I have to mention that local media sites are already rife with antagonisms and name calling and bullying. And the bullying has occurred for owners who have expressed concerns about buildings that don't have enough parking. And in fact, I have 2 first-person accounts of owners being threatened with loss of customers. So this is really, really important information about what goes on in Roslindale Square. And I think it needs to balance all the things that have been said already. Again, I tried to be a panelist and I was not allowed. So
Thank you, Lori. I appreciate your time to testify. Next, we'll have Alan Wright. Alan, if you could raise your hand. Alan, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Alan Wright. I'm a 35-year resident of Roslindale. I was on the part of the group, the citizens group that worked to bring a grocery store back which is now the Village Market. I've been very active in many different activities in Rosendale. I'm on the board of Walk Up Rosendale. Walk Up Rosendale's mission is to make Rosendale Village a more pleasant and safer place for everyone, including pedestrians in particular. I'm also in the leadership group of Rosie Bikes, the Rosendale Bike Coalition for the community. One of my volunteer responsibilities for the past decade has been to oversee and manage the placement and taking up and putting down of the parklet that is next to Fornax Bakery on Cohasset Street. That has involved periodically having to buy materials, new wood and parts and so on to repair the parklet. We've been able to scrap together money from people's donations. Main Streets has contributed a little bit, as has Fornax. I'm also involved with some of the efforts to add additional greenery and keep plants going on and so forth. There's various volunteers. One of the things that's absolutely clear is that Rosendale has a very rich community of volunteers, but we're a little bit short on funds, so I support this benefit district. I will also report that the board of Walk Up Rosendale supports this, and I want to thank Councilor Arroyo and Councilor Worrell for sponsoring this effort. I think it will make Rosendale a much richer and a better place to have the benefit district. This parking plan is very, very important, despite some recent testimony we just heard. We have merchants who, one in particular, who parks all the time in front of his business. I think the key to making this work to ensure that turnover will occur will be some enforcement, which currently is lacking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. And thank you for everyone who showed up today to testify regarding parking benefits districts. Now I'll just go to my council colleague for any closing remarks. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Councilor Worrell, Chair Worrell. I think parking benefit districts have wonderful impacts on our neighborhoods if they're allowed to flourish. And so this is one of the situations where, I wish I was going to be able to sort of shepherd this from concept to final plan. And it's my hope that my successor and the council continue to do that. But a large part of putting this hearing on was to ensure that folks are able to see and hear sort of the benefits of this. And I think, Mr. Chair, someone else who represents very residential aspects of the city where they may be experimenting with or already have meters coming in. Something like this is really beneficial for those types of neighborhoods because it allows for real reinvestment controlled by those neighborhoods into those neighborhoods in a way that's tangible. Often when we deal with the budget or when we deal with finances with the city, it can feel sort of, I pay this money, I have no idea where this is going. When you have a neighborhood thing that's directly tied to the neighborhood, like, hey, you are more likely to visit your own neighborhood barbershop or grocery store or, drink shop or whatever it is that's there, because you're more likely to be paying into these meters more often, it makes more sense to me that you benefit from those funds directly when you're a residential neighborhood. And so in a way, this is equitable to that, but I also just think that this gives a lot of overarching benefits to our neighborhoods. And I hope whoever is sort of in charge of Ways and Means or in charge of planning and transportation or whatever those may be, looks at this as a way to increase neighborhood participation, but also impact of these dollars. I don't think we would have to raise the amount that people have to put into the meters. I think it's just a matter of making sure that once the city pays for what it takes to do enforcement, whatever's left over goes directly towards these things. And from a transparency standpoint, Rosendale has Rosendale Board of Trade, Rosendale's business district is very engaged. It was, as mentioned before, the very first Main Street. And so I'm very proud of Rosendale's Main Streets and its impact and how it works. It has Walk Up Rosendale. We have a very engaged, it has the Rosendale Health Center. We have a very engaged neighborhood that also is very used to having boards and participating civically in this way. And so I think it's a phenomenal place to sort of pilot this. The fact that it's not a lot of money from the city's perspective makes it even better, because it's safer to do that than if we were just handing over millions of dollars. You know, when we make $36 million in city enforcement, either through enforcement or fines and fees and meters, you got $36 to $37 million, and we're talking about $200,000 to $300,000. I don't really think that this is going to put a dent in any of the major projects that the city is thinking about. And I will just note, you know, for all of the idea that putting that money in a general fund to be distributed across the city makes a lot of sense when we're talking about areas like Seaport or places like that, where the fact of the matter is they're from a financial standpoint, they're in a very different bracket, tax bracket than my neighborhoods. But when we're talking about shared costs, right, I think it makes a lot of sense for something like this that's smaller scale to have a real impact, because you put $200,000 or $150,000 into Rosendale Square, you're going to know what that looks like. You're going to see that off the bat. You're going to feel that difference. And in the outlying Rosendale area, because I don't think it has to be confined to just that square. You know, if it goes up Belgrade, for instance, I don't think that's terrible. Like the Rosendale Main Streets areas, I think make a lot of sense for this. But essentially, this is something that I think has only upside. I don't really see downside to this when we're talking about these amounts in comparison to what the city of Boston is bringing in. And if it works really well, which I expect that it will, it's something that we can then use within our other residential neighborhoods. And, you know, no disrespect to the idea that if we open up a pilot to Rosendale, all of a sudden, you know, the downtown districts are going to ask for that. That would require downtown neighborhoods, which really don't exist. You know, I know maybe in the future they will, because we're talking about converting office space, but right now it's just not the same kind of residential neighborhoods. We see that whether it's in civic engagement and voting numbers, the number of votes that come out of these neighborhoods, or if we're talking about organizations specifically dedicated to these things, like community meeting groups and things of that nature. That's not to say that they don't have them, but I don't think that just because Rosendale got a parking benefit district, that all of a sudden these downtown districts are going to request them, or that we're required to provide them where we don't think it's equitable or makes sense. I think this is a perfect example of a place to do a pilot with low stakes for the city from a budget standpoint, but with a potential for high impact. And then looking at that and making a verdict on that moving forward in terms of whether or not it was effective or not, or how we can tweak the program to make it more effective moving forward. I just think this is a perfect opportunity for the city to do that, especially since these meters are coming in and aren't already in. This isn't even money that the city has already budgeted for themselves. They're not using this money for something else, and we're asking them to take it away from that. This money hasn't even started to come in yet. So it's something that I think makes a lot of sense. I support it wholeheartedly. I'm grateful to you know, Brendan and other folks for bringing this to my attention, but also for presenting today and doing what they have done really well, which is advocate for better neighborhoods in better communities. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Dempsey, for taking your time to be here. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for holding this.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. And I will keep this in committee, and going into next term, I'm definitely interested to see if the city will be doing a pilot program. And, you know, I like the idea of, you know, finding creative ways to get more dollars fund services to our business districts and just to our districts just in general. So I'm happy to, you know, maybe revise the language a little bit because, you know, I don't represent District 5, so kind of, you know, make it more general wording in the hearing. But, you know, definitely interested in seeing, you know, if we can establish a pilot program somewhere in the city. And it sounds like Rosendale Village is advocating for themselves for that, for them to be the pilot. So I'm willing to take it up next year and refile it. So looking forward to having this conversation next year. So thank you, everyone. Yep.
I will just say you do have a little bit of Rosendale because you still got 1912.
Yeah,
so
I do have 1912.
Rosendale there.
Right.
A couple streets in Rosendale. So you definitely do still touch it a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I do have a little Rosy. But yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate all your time, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.